The Trump administration is facing mounting pressure and critical legal deadlines as the government shutdown drags into its 34th day, the longest in U.S. history. By Monday, the administration must inform two federal judges whether it will comply with court rulings ordering it to resume the flow of Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, using available contingency funds to keep the nation's largest food aid program running. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. These court mandates were issued amid fears that millions of low-income Americans could soon go without essential food support if federal funding remains frozen. The impasse has intensified as President Donald Trump shows no signs of backing down from his confrontation with Democrats. In a candid, 60 Minutes interview that aired Sunday night, Trump declared he would not be extorted by his political opponents, firmly stating that he would only engage in meaningful negotiations on health care and other democratic priorities once the government fully reopens. He emphasized that his administration intends to leverage its slim Republican majorities in Congress to continue advancing its agenda without yielding to Democratic demands. "They want to pressure us into a bad deal," Trump said, "but that's not going to happen." Meanwhile, the tangible effects of the shutdown continue to ripple across the nation. One of the most immediate concerns is the mounting shortage of air traffic controllers, many of whom are now working without pay. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy has repeatedly warned that the situation is becoming increasingly unsustainable. As controllers face growing financial strain and exhaustion, airports are beginning to experience more widespread delays and cancellations. Duffy cautioned that if the standoff continues, travelers should expect significant disruptions, noting that the aviation system cannot operate safely under prolonged financial stress on its personnel. The crisis has also hit the education and childcare sectors hard, particularly affecting families who rely on federally funded Head Start programs. These centers, which provide early education, meals, and critical developmental therapies to children from low-income families, are closing at alarming rates. Many of these programs serve children who are homeless or in foster care, meaning the closures are depriving some of the most vulnerable members of society of their only reliable access to food and stability. Some centers have managed to stay open using emergency funds, but many others have announced indefinite closures. "It's heartbreaking," one administrator said. "For these kids, this is more than school, it's safety, nutrition, and care." Yet, amid these escalating consequences, Trump remains resolute. When pressed during his 60 Minutes interview about whether he was concerned about the human cost of the shutdown, he appeared unmoved. "I think they have to," he said, referring to federal workers enduring weeks without pay. "And if they don't vote, it's their problem." His remark underscored his determination to stand firm until Democrats agree to his terms, particularly regarding funding for border security and the construction of a wall along the southern border, the central point of contention that ignited the shutdown in the first place. In the Senate, tensions are also boiling over. Democrats have now voted 13 times against Republican efforts to reopen portions of the government without a broader negotiation that includes their priorities. They insist that any spending bill must be the result of bipartisan talks and not one-sided Republican initiatives. Their stance has infuriated Trump, who has begun calling on GOP leaders to consider a drastic procedural move, ending the Senate filibuster rule. "Republicans have to get tougher," Trump told CBS, his tone sharp and unapologetic. "If we end the filibuster, we can do exactly what we want." The filibuster currently requires 60 votes to advance most major legislation, a threshold that forces both parties to work together. Ending it would allow the majority party to pass bills with a simple 51-vote majority, effectively silencing the minority. However, many Senate Republicans are resisting Trump's demand. Senior members of his own party have repeatedly argued that the 60-vote requirement is a cornerstone of the Senate's deliberative process, ensuring that both sides of the political aisle maintain a voice. They also note that this rule has protected Republicans in the past when Democrats held power, preventing what they viewed as harmful or overreaching liberal policies from passing unopposed. "The Senate is designed to be a check on rash decision-making," one Republican senator said. "If we throw out the filibuster, we lose that safeguard forever." As the standoff continues, the strain on ordinary Americans deepens. Across the country, food banks are reporting surges in demand as furloughed federal employees and low-income families turn to them for help. Renters in federally subsidized housing fear eviction, and small businesses dependent on government contracts are struggling to survive without payments. The U.S. economy is beginning to show signs of stress, with economists warning that prolonged instability could slow growth and erode public trust in Washington's ability to govern. Yet neither side appears ready to concede. Democrats argue that Trump's insistence on border wall funding, a campaign promise they consider both ineffective and wasteful, is holding the entire nation hostage. Republicans, in turn, claim that Democratic leaders are prioritizing political theater over national security. It's become a war of wills, said one political analyst. Neither Trump nor the Democrats want to be seen as the one who blinked first. Behind the scenes, moderate lawmakers from both parties are exploring potential compromises, such as temporary funding extensions or targeted reopening of certain agencies. But these efforts have repeatedly faltered amid the deep mistrust and political polarization that define the current climate. As the clock ticks toward another week of gridlock, millions of Americans remain caught in the crossfire. Federal employees line up at food pantries, parents scramble for childcare, and travelers endure longer delays, all while Washington remains paralyzed. The nation watches as its leaders trade blame and defiance, with no clear path forward. If the administration fails to meet Monday's court-imposed deadlines regarding SNAP funding, legal challenges could escalate, potentially forcing emergency judicial intervention to prevent further harm to low-income families. Yet even that would not resolve the underlying political standoff, a confrontation that has now become as much about pride and principle as policy. As one senior lawmaker put it, this shutdown stopped being about budgets a long time ago. It's about who wins the fight, and the country is paying the price. The morning sun rose over Washington, D.C., casting a pale light over a city that had grown weary from weeks of political paralysis. The usual hum of activity around the federal buildings was replaced by an unsettling quietness. Streets that once bustled with government workers were nearly empty, as tens of thousands of them remained home, unpaid, uncertain, and increasingly desperate. Inside the White House, President Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office surrounded by advisors, his expression firm and unyielding. The government shutdown had stretched into its 34th day, a record-breaking standoff that had paralyzed vast parts of the nation, and there was no sign of resolution. What had begun as a dispute over border wall funding had morphed into a test of wills, a bitter battle between the president and Congress that now threatened the stability of millions of lives. Federal agencies that provided food assistance, childcare, and public safety were running on fumes. Among the most critical of these was SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, responsible for feeding over 38 million Americans each month. Two federal judges had issued rulings compelling the administration to find contingency funds to resume SNAP benefits during the shutdown. The court orders came with a strict deadline. The administration had to respond by Monday, either confirming its compliance or risking contempt of court. Across the country, families who depended on those benefits watched the news anxiously, wondering whether they would still have food for their children in the coming days. Grocery stores in low-income neighborhoods began to see a decline in SNAP transactions, and some even warned that without government disbursements, they might have to close their doors. In his televised, 60 Minutes interview the night before, President Trump appeared calm but defiant. Sitting across from the interviewer in a dimly lit room, he declared that he would not bow to Democratic pressure. "I won't be extorted," he said, his voice unwavering. "They can shut everything down if they want, but I'm not going to let them take advantage of the American people." To his critics, the statement was yet another example of Trump's combative nature, a reflection of his desire to project strength even in the face of mounting chaos. To his supporters, it was a sign of resilience, a leader unwilling to bend to what they saw as political blackmail from the opposition. Behind the scenes, however, the situation was spiraling. The shutdown had frozen countless federal programs, halted construction projects, delayed tax refunds, and left vital agencies running skeleton crews. Air traffic control centers across the country were particularly strained. With paychecks withheld, many controllers were calling in sick, unable to cover commuting costs or childcare expenses. The remaining workers were exhausted, pulling double shifts to keep the skies safe. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy had been warning for days that the system was approaching a breaking point. Delays were rippling through major airports, from New York to Los Angeles, and the strain on the aviation network was palpable. "We are holding this together with duct tape," one controller admitted anonymously. But we can't